Hello, I'm Frost, and welcome to my Is It For You guides, where we look at a particular sci-fi video game to help you decide whether it is the right kind of game for you. In this episode, it is Battlestar Galactica Deadlock. So say we all. Welcome back. So, Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, which is a mouthful, so from now on I'll just be calling it BSG. So, BSG was released on the 31st of August 2017. It is a turn-based strategy game and is based on the TV show, the version from the early 2000s, as you'll see from the game, from the ships and the great soundtrack. Now, in this game, you obviously fight the cybernetic lifeform nodes, or as we know in short, Cylons, and it's played on both a strategic and a tactical map. So let's start with the game premise. In the campaign, you are the commander of the colonial fleet in a battle against the Cylons across 4 star systems, and you have to keep these 12 colonies happy, the 12 colonies being a quorum, and you do that by making sure that you can show a significant battle presence in each of the colonies and help fight off the Cylons. Now, this takes place on 2 different maps, as I mentioned earlier. The first one is the tactical combat map, which is the one that is going to be of most interest, as this is where most of the gameplay takes place. So it is a 3D map, and you start the game by coming out of jump and landing on grid, and you get to first of all place your ships in kind of the layout that suits you the best. Then, once you actually start the combat, you will find that the thing that I find it makes this game very different from a lot of others, and that is that you do not take turns in an alternate way. Instead, you both take your turn at the same time, both you and your opponent being the Cylons. So you decide what you're going to do with your ships, where you're going to move them, how you're going to fight, what you're going to shoot, etc, etc. Your opponent does the same, and then once you end the turn, you then both move at the same time. So you've got free movement in space, so you can go up and down to a limited degree, and left, right, and backwards and forwards. So you've got, all axis of movements, and you have multiple ships at your disposal, and these ships have varying attributes. So, for example, they would have turrets, they would have missiles. You would also have fighter squadrons, and also you have some electronic warfare capabilities. So the ships that you start with at the beginning are things like the Corvette. Now, the Corvette has front-facing turrets. I believe it has rear ones as well, and also can shoot missiles. Now, these can be guided missiles. A little bit later on, you can get things like torpedoes. Then you have your frigates. Your frigates are kind of more like a standard battleship, like a naval battleship, in the sense that its turrets shoot from the side. So you have to turn and present your broadside in order to fire your weapons. They then have missiles as well, and on top of that you get your squadrons. Now, your squadrons can be Vipers or they can be Raptors, and I will come on to what both of those do in a sec. And then further along you have your gunships, which don't have squadrons but have lots of firepower. They can be focused on missiles or on turrets. And then you have your battle stars, which is like Battlestar Galactica, which you'll be very familiar with if you've seen the TV show. And these are essentially tanky frigates, that they have the turrets, they have the missiles, they have the squadrons, and so forth. So, as I said, we got these joint turns, and you therefore have to maneuver your ships in order to do the most damage to your enemy whilst also protecting your weakened flanks. So you can be shot on your front, your rear, your sides, and top and bottom. So depending on where you take damage, you have to try and maneuver your ships to reduce the amount of damage that you're taking and tank that incoming fire, whilst also being able to present a front that will actually be able to project some damage onto your opponent. On top of that, you also have to manage subsystems. So your ships have various subsystems, which could be things like engineering, fire control, navigation, hangar for your squadrons. And if these get damaged, you have to repair, as if you don't, then obviously you lose capabilities. So, for example, if your navigation is hit, then the distance which you can travel is reduced. If your fire control is hit, you can't shoot, which is a big problem. Then, on top of that, you also have something called posture. And the posture means that you can focus more on being on an attack mode or in a defensive mode. So, for example, you can be boarded by the Cylon. If that's the case, then if you put your ship into defensive mode, then you have more Marines available to be able to fight off your Cylon invaders. If you're in attack mode, you do more damage, you can move further, and things along those lines. And then you have your squadrons, and you can assign roles to your squadron. So for example, you have your Vipers, and your Vipers you can put in straightforward attack mode, where you point them to go and attack a particular opponent. Or you can put them in a defensive mode, for example, where they would then protect your ship from incoming missiles and be able to shoot down those missiles, which is very, very useful, as you don't get much E-War at the beginning, and you're heavily reliant on your Vipers to protect your ships from the Cylon Nemesis ships, which do a lot of damage with their missiles. And then you have your Raptor, and your Raptor can do all kinds of things, but its primary two purposes is it can boost your firewalls. So the Cylons can hack your subsystems, and you can help defend against that by assigning a Raptor to boost the firewall on your ship to reduce the amount of damage being done to your subsystems. You can also use your Raptor, as it's equipped with Marines, to board enemy ships and disrupt their subsystems. So the Raptor can be very, very useful, so you have to make a choice between your Vipers and your Raptors. Then one of the things that to me is very much a highlight of BSG is the replays. Now, once you've finished a tactical combat, you can replay that. And what is a really, really nice touch, as you can see, is that it shows it to you in the filming style of the TV show. You kind of get this kind of like wobbly camera movement, and then a zoom in on the action, kind of like it's shot from like a handheld video camera. And so as soon as you see that, you are taken back to the TV show, and that makes it very, very immersive. Then we are going to move on to the strategic map. As you can see in front of you, we have the 4 systems. So we have Helios Delta up here, Helios Beta to the northeast, southwest is Helios Gamma, and then Helios Alpha in the southeast. Within these 4 star systems, you have the various planets. So you'll recognize the names like Caprica, Geminon, and Picon, which are in Helios Alpha. Now, all of the colonies are represented by these flags at the top, as you can see. And then underneath, you can see we've got a different color, which at the moment it's all green because I'm in control of the situation and all my colonies are happy. That is not always the case. And we'll come on to that in a little moment with the intelligence. But anyway, so you have fleets, and these fleets can have up to 7 ships. You have your primary fleet, which also includes your shipyard, which is Fleet Group Daedalus. And then you can see that I have fleets out in Helios Gamma. I have this one, which I call Colonial Fleet Beta. I have Colonial Fleet Delta over in Helios Delta. I have Colonial Fleet Zeta, then covering Helios Beta. So I have sort of coverage for all of my areas. And then we have the little red things here, which are Cylon fleets, which are causing us problems. We then have these markers here. These are side mission markers, which we'll come back to in a minute. And then we have our main mission markers here. So you can see I've got up to chapter 8, and I believe this is a 10 chapter mission. I haven't got further than that. I should mention at this stage as well that I normally put at least 40 hours into a game before I do one of these guides, as I feel it's important to get a really good feel for the game. Now moving on, so we have to keep the colonies happy. And the reason why we want to keep the colonies happy is because the colonies, if they are happy, they give us Tilium. So if I go to the intelligence tab here, you can see here are all my colonies, and you can see that at the moment their status is steadfast. Now, steadfast is the best it can be. That means that they are truly happy with your colonial fleet and the work that you're doing. If you fail to protect your colonies correctly, then this will change, and it will go from steadfast down to concerned, then it will drop to unstable, finally, next to faltering, and then finally to defected. And these numbers will keep dropping down. And the less Tilium you have, the worse situation you're going to be in. So you can see right now I'm in a rosy situation. I have plus 392 Tilium supply. Now, Tilium is what you use to build ships. So if I click on build ships, you can see that right now I have, for example, the Corvettes that I mentioned at the beginning. So a Corvette would cost me 107 to build, and it will take 2 turns, or I can rush it immediately for 447. And it goes on and up as you go on. So you can see the frigates and these gunships take 3 turns, and then the cruiser and the Battlestar take 4 turns to build, with the Battlestar taking 638 Tilium to build. Now you have a bit of a juggling act, because Tilium isn't just used for for building ships, it's also used for emergency jumps. So as you saw, if I go back to the build ships again, if you look at the Battlestar, you will see that it has a FTL cooldown of 3 turns, which means that it can't jump for 3 turns, but you can do an emergency jump. And if you do an emergency jump, this will require Tilium. So if I look at Canadian Fleet Beta right now, you can see that the jump isn't going to cost me anything because that fleet has been sitting there for 3 turns. If I go close this though and go to my Daedalus, you can see it's going to cost me 220 Tilium in order to jump this fleet if I don't, so I'm not waiting the full 3 turns. This FTL recharge will go down with each turn. So if I go close that and go to my Ceta, that's 110. Obviously there's slightly more expensive ships there as well. And then if I look at this unit, it's 190. So I really don't want to jump these anytime soon and I want to let them cool down. But I may need to do an emergency jump, for example, to cover these invading fleets if it's dropping down my status with the colonies. So that's your juggling act. And if you run out of Tilium, you run into real problems, as you then can't do an emergency jump and you may be overwhelmed by the Cylons, you can't get away, and then you lose your whole fleet. So that's one of the things you have to be very careful of. Now, we talked about the side missions earlier, and I'm coming back to these now, as these bring you something called requisition points, which is your RP, which is highlighted here in the middle. So you can see my RP is currently 105, and that is because I use my RP to buy blueprints. So you start off with your Manticore and your frigate, and then you can then spend your requisition points, which arrive a little bit later in the game. The blueprints become available not immediately, but later. So a Ranger cruiser, I think required 1,000 requisition points. The gunship required about 1,500, and the Battlestar required about 2,000. So you want to try and accumulate these requisition points so that you can get better ships. You can also get better munitions. So you start off with just a guided missile, then you get torpedoes, then you get the ability to get PCM, which is your ECM missile, which can basically stop munitions. And then your squadrons, you start off with a Viper Mark 1 to start with and a Raptor, and then you move up to things like the Viper Mark 2 and the Sweeper. So there's a good progress there. But your requisition points, you can also, if you want, you can use it for your officers. Now, your officers level up naturally over time. And the reason why you want your officers to level up is because you get bonuses to fleet points, which is how strong your fleet can be. Even though you're limited to 7 ships, you can put stronger ships in there. So if you want to have loads of Battlestars and frigates rather than just corvettes, Battlestars and gunships rather than just frigates and corvettes, then you need to be able to boost up your fleet points to make sure that you have the ability to be able to handle a fleet of that power. You get other bonuses such as subsystem strengths, and also you get experience points gains and damage reduction. Now, if you don't want to, you want to level up faster, for example, you need to be able to fit a Battlestar into your fleet, you can then promote. But the promote will require that you use those requisition points in order to be able to advance. So you're doing a juggling act between your blueprints and the ability to promote your officers. So that pretty much covers what you get. In terms of progression then, you can have up to 7 ships, so you've got to work on building your ships. Other element of progression is you want to build up the quality of your ships. Then you want to add more and more squadrons. And so you can only do that by having stronger ships like a Battlestar, which can have 2 squadrons instead of just the frigate having 1. And then also you want to go towards the Ewok route, where instead of having, let's say, a Viper or a Raptor, you may want to have one of these sweepers, which can send out flak, which can reduce incoming munitions damage, and also use the PCM missiles, which I mentioned earlier. Now, in terms of difficulty, the learning curve is pretty steep in the first couple of hours. It's pretty tough going, but once you kind of get an understanding of the mechanics, then you're on your way. So I would say that the difficulty is worth that initial kind of struggle, but then once you get beyond that, then you're making some really good progress. Now, in terms of the speed of the gameplay, that's slow. You can take it in your own time. It's a turn-based system. So the pace is definitely easily controlled. You can stop, go away, have a cup of tea, come back, have a think about what you're going to do next, and then to plan your moves as you move on. I'm just going to move a little bit down my notes here because I've gone a little bit off screen. There we go. So right, the next thing that we want to cover is immersiveness. Now, immersiveness I think is very good. If you're a fan of the TV show, everything here will be very, very familiar to you. And if you like the Battlestar Galactica lore, then you will be well entertained by the game. Especially when you listen, you hear the eerie soundtrack in the background, the ship behaviors, the sounds of the guns, the turrets going doo, 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 and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really good on the immersive front. Then playtime, you got a good 40 hours at least with just the initial game. Like I said, I've been playing this about 36 to 40 hours now. I did restart because the difficulty of the game means that you will play it for a few hours, realize you've messed everything up, and then you run out of Tilium and you're getting overwhelmed, and you go, I will do it right this time, and you will restart the campaign, I am sure. But that means that you get good replayability. And coming back to the playtime, I will say as well that there are 5 DLCs that have been released. So since the game was released, we've had the 5 DLCs, the most recent being Ghost Offensive, which released in 2020. And this has been filmed in June 2020, so it came out just a couple of months ago. And there is a good chance that there will be more DLCs. So that, in terms of replayability, you're going to do really well. You've got loads of DLCs. You obviously get to redo the campaign. But then also on top of that, you have skirmish mode. Skirmish mode means that you don't do the campaign, you just do the combat. And what's interesting about the skirmish mode is that not only can you use pre-made fleets, but you can also customize your fleets, and you can fight as the Cylons. You don't have to fight as the Colonial Fleet. So you can take the opposing team, which is great because you get to fly and experience all of those ships as well. It's worth mentioning as well with the DLCs that you get new campaigns, you get new ships, you get new missions, you get new maps on which you play. This varies from DLC to DLC. They don't all include all of these things at once, but you get a good selection. Then, in terms of a time sink, it is substantial. You can sink a lot of time into this game, primarily because the battles are quite lengthy. Even if you know what you're doing and you're acting quickly, a simple skirmish is going to take about 10 minutes. One with a full fleet, of battle stars and gunships, you're looking at a good 20 to 30 minutes, and that's just by acting quickly without even thinking about it. And the way that Battlestar Galactica works is that you go, I'll just do one more turn because I've got everything under control, so I'll set everything up for when I play next. And then suddenly you get intercepted en route and you have a skirmish you have to do. So it does draw you back in, and I will say that on the time sink front, it is pretty substantial. But the good thing is that you can save on a regular basis, and if you've got good discipline, then you're okay. Now the highlights. Oh, actually, before I come on to the highlights, let me cover the multiplayer. So everything I've described so far is on a single player, but there is a multiplayer mode. The multiplayer can be on a private server, so you play with just friends, or you can go into a public server. Now, I had a quick look at the public server. I haven't played multiplayer myself. It seemed pretty quiet, but there is a Discord server as well. So I'm sure that it's just a question of arranging suitable times with people and organizing it that way. Now, you can play 1v1, so you play against an opponent, or you can team up with a friend and fight against the AI. Then coming on to the highlights. Now, the highlights for me are the look and feel of the game. If you're, like I said a number of times already, if you're a fan of the show, you will love this game. It is really, really close in terms of the way that they've done it, and the style it works really, really well. The turn-based system, I think, is really good. I think it's really unusual to have this kind of both playing out your turns at the same time. I think that makes it more interesting. It's a little bit, you have to plan. You can't plan as easily because you're not quite sure what your enemy are going to do. And the fact that you can customize your ships as well really helps to suit differing playstyles. So, for example, I like range. So I actually much prefer the Battlestars and the Corvettes that allow me to use lots of missiles and use squadrons to fight at range. But if you're more into the melee kind, then you can go for the gunships, which have loads of firepower and heavy tank, and you just go head first and flying into the enemy fleet if that's your thing. And then finally, like I said, I mentioned the DLCs already. I think they've got a good number of DLCs. I don't know whether they continue. I believe they're continuing to expand it. In fact, yes, they are, because I had discussions with Slytherin, and they said they're working on season 2. So there's definitely more DLCs coming. So that is good news as well. And I think the game mechanics work very, very well. So there you go. That's my wrap up for the game. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give me a like. Please make sure to subscribe if you want more of this series, as I am going to be releasing more. I also produce a lot of content for Planetfall and other sci-fi games as well. So hit the bell icon if you want to get notified of my latest releases. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and hopefully I'll see you again soon in one of my other videos. All right, take care.